35. Encouragement to persevere. Aloud. As usual, Tani was full of energy one regular Tuesday morning as we walked to school. It was summer, the long vacation was about to begin, and Tani was excited. The sidewalks were too crowded for Tani to run, but he didn't mind. He skipped along beside me, talking 1,000 miles an hour. But it wasn't the prospect of all that time out of school that he was obsessing over. It was something else entirely, a book. Tani loves to read, and most nights he ends up falling asleep with a book over his face. He reads fast, and as soon as he's finished a book that he likes, he'll talk about it with the same passion and excitement that he shows when he's returned from a great chess session. He talks so clearly and in such detail that sometimes I don't think I even need to read the book myself. I know where this comes from. My father was passionate about education, and I have always encouraged the boys to read. In New York, we started visiting the public library soon after we moved into the shelter, and after an hour or more of sitting quietly and reading, I would encourage the boys to tell me about what they had read on the way home. The teachers at PS 116 were particularly good at introducing Tani to new stories and new writers. In the first few months that we were living in the shelter, Tani told me all about Martin Luther King Jr., President Obama, and Gandhi. But on this particular Tuesday, Tani was telling me about a nonfiction book he had just finished. I had not heard of the author before, but everything he said about her sounded inspiring. This girl lived near the mountains, and she wanted to go to school so badly, but some people said that she should not be allowed to go to school because she was a girl. Instead of doing what they said or staying quiet, she started complaining and telling people that girls should be allowed to go to school. So the bad men shot her. And what happened? She survived, but even then, she didn't stay quiet. She kept telling people that girls should be allowed to go to school. Her passion was so great. If not because of her, the girls would not be going to school today. Mom, you need to read the book for yourself. I told him that I would. As I walked to the subway to begin my journey to Pastor Philip's kitchen, Tani's words about my needing to read the book stayed with me. He was right in a way that he couldn't have known. I was struggling a little at the time, and the encouragement to persevere and not give up was just what I needed to hear. It was the little things that made life hard, like the fact that you could never have your own key to your room in the shelter. It meant that if you forgot something once you had left the room and closed the door, you had to go up to the 7th floor and wait for someone in the office to become available and escort you back to your room. I spent too many mornings waiting for 10 or sometimes 15 minutes in the lobby while Tani or Austin raced back up to retrieve some homework or other essential item for school that they had forgotten. The weather was difficult as well. I had guessed that winter in a city this far north would be brutal, but the summer's humidity was something else. There were days when the streets were even worse than the sticky, sweaty heat of Pastor Philip's kitchen. Then there was the waiting. Our asylum claim was progressing, or so we were told, but weeks and months crept by and still nothing changed. It was the same with our applications for work authorization and social security numbers. All we could do was wait and talk about the next steps we would take as soon as we could officially look for work. Audiobook and I approached the waiting differently. He made a clear and detailed plan that would see him reach his goal of becoming a realtor. His intention was to save what he could from cleaning houses, and then, as soon as the approval was granted, he would buy a car and become an Uber driver and study to become a real estate agent in the evenings. As much as I could share his excitement and admire his passion and determination, I could not feel the same about my own future. Even though I had a plan of my own to train to become a home health aide, I felt trapped. I knew why. Almost as soon as we left Dallas, my uncle started phoning regularly. I was happy enough to talk about how life was for us in New York, but I could tell he wanted more. He wanted to talk about what had happened between us and his wife, to go back and fix things and make sure that it was all neatly resolved. I could not do that. I'd tell him that I was okay, that we were all okay. We might not be living in the biggest apartment, but I have peace, I said. I'm not angry with her, but I just don't want to go backward and return to it. If I focus only on the stuff that has happened, I will never move forward. And I need to move forward. I have a lot of things to do. I have to take care of my family. My kids need me. When we first arrived at the shelter, I'll admit that I was a little nervous. The city was so big and loud and different from anything we had experienced before that I spent too many nights lying awake wondering how things might be about to change. Each day in those first weeks and months seemed to introduce a new danger, a new distraction that was a threat. It wasn't our personal safety that worried me so much. We had made it through Boko Haram, after all. What concerned me was us as a family. Split between two rooms on separate floors, and having lost so much family already, was there a chance that I might be about to lose my boys as well? But Austin and Tani have always had a strange way of saying or doing the right thing at the right time. Tani's comment about the girl he'd been reading about was typical of him, and it gave me just the right boost of encouragement and optimism that I needed that day. Austin is quieter than Tani, and like his father, Austin won't speak unless he has weighed his words carefully. But so many times when we were in the shelter, he asked me how I was doing or gave me a hug at just the right time. It never failed to go right to my heart. So I was grateful for them and grateful for my husband, who kept us together and reminded us all of where we came from and where we were going. I was grateful for the friends we had made at church who became family to us and for the people at the shelter, like Miss Maria, who continued to show such kindness every time we saw her. And by the time the summer of 2018 began, and we marked the first anniversary of our arrival in America, there was one other part of our life for which I was now so very grateful. Chess. As soon as Tani started at the Thursday after-school chess club and came home repeating Coach Sean's and Coach Russ's wisdom, Kaode and I knew that the game, and his coaches, had captured his imagination. When Tani started practicing for hours on his own, we knew that this was going to be a major obsession. But it was not until I arrived early to get him from one club meeting and saw the way Tani and the coaches interacted that I understood how deep a connection he was making with them. Coach Russ and Coach Sean were standing in front of the board talking about the summer chess camp they were running and why it was a good opportunity for the students to improve. Tani was sitting right in the front row, and he was one of the only kids wearing his blue PS 116 chess club t-shirt. "Hey," said Tani, turning around when a kid at the back started talking. "Listen to Coach Russ. He's serious about all this." The coaches smiled at each other. It wasn't as though they were laughing at Tani. Their smiles were warm and full of love. I had the feeling this was not the first time Tani had done it, and that they liked it a lot. To see two young men who are proud of your son and love him like you do is one of the greatest gifts a mother can ever receive. Coach Russ continued, still smiling. "Thanks, Tani, and he's got a point. This matters. If you're coming here and you're not dialed in, you're not going to taste any of the success that you could be capable of." And I look around and I wonder, why is Tani the only one wearing the shirt? And if Tani can do 500 puzzles each week, why can't you? He's the hardest working kid here, but he's been playing for less time than all of you. I watched Tani closely as he listened to Coach Russ. He wasn't turning around to gloat. He didn't seem proud at all. He just looked like he was genuinely glad to be there, and he wanted everyone else to appreciate what they were being taught. When the meeting ended and Tani went to pack up his bag, Coach Russ and Coach Sean came to talk to me. "He's doing so well," said Coach Russ, his eyes sparkling and the words rushing from his mouth. "He's spending twice as much time practicing as the most engaged kids in the program. They do 2 hours each day, and he does 4. And like you've seen, he's right there at the front, his hand up first, always focused, always listening. We've got other kids in the program with the same rating, but Tani's intensity and maturity are way higher than most. He's a great kid." "Thank you, Coach Russ. You are both so kind to him." "Are you kidding?" said Coach Russ. "Tani's great, and we love having him on the team. It's Coach Sean who's really working closely with him." Coach Sean was different. He moved more slowly, with precision and purpose. But there was the same smile on his face when he talked about my son. "Tani's like a nephew to me. He's mature for his age, he listens so well, and he always takes things in, even the life lessons that I try and teach them. When he plays, he's always looking to win. He's like a tiger with feelings." Tani came over, grinning at the three of us. "What do you think about summer camp, Tani?" said Coach Russ. "Could you join us?" "Yes, please, Coach Russ." I shifted a little, and Coach Russ must have noticed because he said, "We have money set aside for Tani's place. It's all taken care of if he'd like to come. And if Austin wants to come along and earn some money by helping out, we'd be happy to have him too." I didn't know what to say. "Mrs. Adewumi, this isn't charity. My priority is building winning chess programs and developing strong players, and Tani's skill and attitude are impressive. If Tani wasn't so passionate with such tremendous raw talent, I wouldn't be pushing him so hard, but he has it all, and I want him around our program. His excitement is infectious, and he makes the others want to work harder. And this isn't the first time we've done this, and we've found that sometimes our best kids are the ones who take advantage of these opportunities that we give them because they don't have so many opportunities in life. So what do you say? Can he come? We'll take good care of him." I still wasn't sure what to say. There was never any doubt in my mind about whether they would keep Tani safe. Everything I had seen so far had told me that the coaches were good people who were offering a great service. What was holding me back was the fact that I didn't know how to say a big enough thank you for all they had done. It wasn't just the scholarship or the life lessons they were teaching Tani. It was more than that. They were giving Tani the one thing that was impossible for Kaode and me to provide, no matter how hard we worked. They were giving him the opportunity to belong to a wider family. "Yes," I said. "I would never trust anyone with my children, but I trust you with him."
36. Becoming a student of the game. Tani. 45 minus 1 is equal to 44. That's the number of days I went to summer camp last summer. 44 times 8 is equal to 352. We spent 8 hours a day playing chess or talking about chess or just doing things that helped us get better at chess. So that means I spent 352 hours practicing chess at camp. 1,100 minus 550 is equal to 550. At the start of the camp, my rating was 550. At the end, it was 1,100. That means it doubled in 2 months. 550 divided by 352 is equal to 1.56. So for every hour I was at camp, my rating improved by more than 1.5 points. Camp was great. I'd never been to a summer camp before. In Dallas, when school was out, we just stayed at Grandma's house and tried to keep quiet and not leave the bedroom, and I don't think we had camp in Nigeria in the summers. There were 2 things I liked a lot about camp. First were all the people who were there. Even though most of them were my age, some of them were really, really good at chess. They came from all over the country, not just Manhattan, and some had ratings as high as 1,600 and were state champions. I think that one of them was even number 2 or 3 in the whole country for their age group. And because they were all really nice, they let me play them. I didn't get to beat too many of them, but there were some games when I could tell that they were having to think really, really deep to beat me. It wasn't just the other kids that made me like being there. As well as Coach Russ and Coach Sean, other coaches were there too. I liked them all, especially Coach Angel. He moves slow and his voice is really gentle, but he's one of the nicest people I've ever met. I think that's why Coach Sean says they are such good friends and that brothers couldn't be closer. The other thing I liked about camp was the fact that Coach Russ organized it and invited Austin to come and help out. That meant that he and I could take the subway together, which was fun. Also, Austin started playing chess properly, and he started to get good too. One day Coach Russ said, "Today we're going to be playing Bug House. Tani and Austin, do you want to go together?" I was really happy and said, "Yes, please, Coach Russ," but Austin was confused and said to me, "What's that?" I said, "Bug House is so cool. You and your partner play as a team against other pairs. You sit next to each other and both play your games at the same time, but anytime you capture one of your opponent's pieces, you give it to your partner, who can then put it on their board and use it. When you play Bug House, you're allowed to give your partner advice, but it didn't take Austin long to work it out. And then bam! We won our first game really quickly. Then we won the next game and the next, and when we were 5-0, we won the whole tournament. There wasn't a trophy, but that was okay. Austin was smiling so big that he didn't even tell me to stop when I was doing the floss dance super fast to celebrate. All through the summer I didn't know that my rating was going up, but I knew I was getting better. I was really trying hard to do deep thinking, and even though it wasn't really easy, it wasn't as hard as it used to be. If I concentrated and wasn't too tired, I could think 3 or 4 moves ahead. The longer camp went on, the closer I got to beating some of the best kids there. Right at the very end of camp, Coach Russ and Coach Sean invited me to go on a trip somewhere called the Hamptons. I had to get up really early and say goodbye to Mom at Penn Station and then sit on a train for a long, long time, but it was worth it. It was like a one-day summer camp where everyone talked about and learned about chess. It was in a school, too, but the thing that I remember the most about it was that I got to play a boy who was just 1 year older than me but had been playing for a long time and had a rating that was higher than 1,300. When the game was over, Coach Sean asked me to sit down with him. He said, "Tani, what do you think about that game?" I said, "Well, I won, so that was good. Wasn't it, Coach Sean?" He shook his head. "No, you didn't just win, Tani. You destroyed him. You were tactical, you played aggressively, you were smart and controlled and disciplined. That was. I don't know what it was, but I was sitting there watching, and I just kept on saying to myself, wow." There wasn't much more to do for the rest of the day, so Coach Sean and I played a game. He's a chess master with a rating of something like 2,200, so he won, but I was watching him, and there were some moments in our game when his face went really still and his eyes stared really hard at the board, so I think he was having to concentrate. After we finished playing, I set up the board again and said, "Coach Sean, I want to show you something." He said okay, and I started playing both the white and the black pieces. White pawn to e4. Black pawn, e5. White knight, f3. Black knight, c6. I knew exactly which piece I wanted to move and where I wanted it to be, and as I played, I was happy because the patterns on the board were right. I wasn't doing deep thinking because I already knew how the game was going to end, but I liked it anyway. I made white sacrifice a pawn but get nothing for it. Then white and black traded a pawn each. Then they traded another pawn each. Then Coach Sean said, "I know this game." I didn't say anything back because I was too busy concentrating and just about to make white sacrifice a pawn, a bishop, and a knight and only get a bishop in return. "That's right," said Coach Sean. "You remember what comes next." I nodded and played on. Black was looking strong, but white was clever. White had laid a trap by sacrificing all those pieces, and black's king was exposed and weak. A few moves later, and it was over. White had won. Coach Sean gave me a fist bump and said, "Paul Morphy, huh?" I nodded. If you don't play chess, you probably have never heard of Paul Morphy. But if you do play chess, then you will definitely have heard of him because Paul Morphy was one of the greatest chess players ever. He was the first unofficial world champion, and as soon as I'd heard some of the coaches talking about him during summer camp, I liked him. Paul Morphy was from a place called New Orleans, and he lived so long ago that there was no such thing as electricity, and there were probably still slaves near where he lived. His dad played in the kitchen every Sunday, and Paul Morphy would watch him. One day, when he was 8 years old, he said to his dad, "Can I play you?" His dad said, "I've never taught you how to play. How can you play me?" He really wanted to play, and his dad said yes, and they played. And Paul Morphy won. His dad was really impressed and took him to his chess club. He won there too. And the more he played, the better he got, and he got so good that he became one of the best players in the whole world. He might even have been the actual best player, but this was such a long time ago that the official organization of chess hadn't even been set up, so there was nobody organizing world championship matches. But if there had been, and Paul Morphy had played, he probably would have won. Coach Sean had told me about Paul Morphy and how most other players at the time played really slowly, but Paul Morphy was totally different and played really fast and aggressively and won games in as little as 20 moves. That's quick. Even though Paul Morphy was alive a long time ago, he still did what every chess player does today, recording the moves he made in each match in a little book. So today there are hundreds of his games that you can look up online, and you can see for yourself how great a player he was. All through that summer I looked up his games whenever I could. I liked the way he laid traps and controlled the center of the board and was willing to sacrifice pieces so that he could win. One of my favorite games is from when he was in Paris, France, playing against two men who were helping each other. It's called the opera game because they were at the opera house, and there was an actual show going on, but they were playing chess instead. Maybe his opponents were distracted by the singing, but I don't think so. Paul Morphy even sacrificed his queen just so he could win. It's a great game, and you should definitely look it up. I liked the opera game a lot, but that wasn't the one that I showed Coach Sean that day when we were in the Hamptons. The one I showed him was one of the first games Paul Morphy played against his dad. I think that he was only 10 or 11 years old at the time, and maybe he'd only been playing a few years. That's why I liked it. When I'd finished playing and was packing away the board, Coach Sean said, "That's the thing about chess, Tani. If you keep playing well and start to become well known as a player, your opponents will study up on you before you meet. There's no more hiding your style." I knew the games of great players like Paul Morphy and Bobby Fischer and Fabiano and all the others were available, and I liked looking at them online. But I'd never thought about looking up an opponent's matches. And I'd never thought that anyone would look up mine. So I thought about what Coach Sean said for a while and then said, so I need to get really good at memorizing lots of different games. Kind of, said Coach Sean. But it's not really about just memory. If someone has studied you and you always play the same moves, then they know what you're going to do. If you're predictable, then you're vulnerable. They might set traps or change the style of the game so that it makes it really hard for you to play the kind of game that you want to play. That didn't sound good at all. I liked winning, and most of the time I did it by playing the way I wanted to play. I didn't like the idea of people not letting me play that way. Coach Sean was smiling. It works to your advantage too. If you can craft your game around the fact that someone may be looking up your public matches and following you, move by move, you can turn that to your advantage. You can lay traps, and you can lead them where you want to. Like Paul Morphy? I asked. Exactly, said Coach Sean. You don't just win by playing the board. You've got to get in their heads as well.